Welcome to A Girl, a Guy, and a Buffy podcast, Small Bites edition. I'm your co-host, Kate Balzer.
And I'm Charles Swint. So our Small Bites episodes are discussions we had in the main episode that didn't quite fit the overall conversation, but we still wanted to share with you all.
We hope you enjoy these tasty conversational bites. We promise. No angry puppy scars from listening.
So, hey, we're back and we've been doing, last season, Kate and I decided we wanted to do these small bites, which were little extra bits that didn't quite fit in. So, Kate, what are we discussing in today's small bite?
So we're talking about the queerness of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
It's so queer. It's so gay.
Just queer.
It's just queer. Queer now. It's
how many lines can we quote?
I know how many. It is
and make them queer.
Yeah. I mean, I think anytime you're doing a show about, I think most supernatural shows are inherently, I don't know, at least that's just me. I think most supernatural shows are inherently queer because you're talking about building a universe that defies our conceptions of what life should look like. Automatically to me says queer. So when I look at like sci-fi shows, when I look at sort of genre shows like these supernatural genre shows, all of those to me somehow, some way inherently say gay.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I think it's very true of Buffy and other genre sci-fi supernatural shows. The characters in it are often outside the norm. They're othered in some way, and obviously that's very true of Willow, Xander, even Buffy once she becomes a Slayer.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a connection to that, to queer culture in the sense of outsider otherness, having to create your own culture, language, social systems.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense why you get that vibe from those kind of shows.
Yeah. I mean, and it also can stand for, the trope of like neurodivergence and all of that stuff,
Yeah, that's true.
And trying to do it. Like, I think anytime anyone is othered in sort of this, in a very largely marginalized way, people who are misunderstood, but in some way, the thing that makes them misunderstood is their superpower, is the thing that makes them like the most uniquely them and the most fabulous. Like, in all the world, there is only one you, Kate. And so, like, why can't you just like kick ass and take names and do all of that stuff? Because no one else can do what you do. And I think to be seen in that way, and then when you start putting like queer characters in those shows that are doing that thing, then you're like, hell yeah, I can do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it speaks to that sense of empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
And encouragement, and like you said, believing that I can do that too.
Superpowers or not.
Yeah.
Although,
I mean, like all things with this show and shows of the time, it definitely was groundbreaking and got some things very right. And it grew over time, but it also had very much played into some stereotypes, particularly as it related to straight men's fear of being gay.
Mm-hmm. And also straight men's sort of view of queerness, their view of like their fears of it, but then there are also views and perceptions of what that is.
Well, yeah, and then the idea of like two women together being like, ooh, sexy, and that whole like kind of pornographic trope.
Yeah, which we see so much with, I mean, through the lens of Xander.
I
mean,
oh, Xander.
Xander. There's always that issue, and I think like one of the things that I don't know. Again, like for a show that worked really hard to tell a really good storyline, and I guess at the same time, I guess it's okay that some of these jokes were made, but like I think I would say like in particularly the the scene of Xander in season 7 when I think we're in Empty Places at this point. I think it's Empty Places where he starts off in the dream and it's the two
Oh, yes,
potentials.
yes, yes.
And they're like, I'm so scared, and I've never been with a man before, and I've never been with her in front of a man before either. Ooh, like that's so like, come on, dude. And like,
Yeah,
why is it happening now? And like,
yeah.
it's here for the joke, but like, why do we need the joke when we've been working so hard to like, again, bring visibility to it? I don't think, do
Yeah,
we
I
need
mean,
that?
yeah, especially like I feel like actually Xander in the later seasons had a little bit of growth. I'm not saying he was like where he should be, but one thing that comes to mind, and maybe I'm seeing this, very differently from the way other people are, but in Intervention, when they think Buffy is having sex with Spike and it's the robot. And he talks about like Spike being very muscled and compact, and everyone kind of looks at him and he
Right,
like doesn't freak out that he complimented another man's body.
right.
Like he's not the one being like, they're just like, I can't believe Xander is saying this. So like weirdly, that's growth for Xander.
Well, and yeah, it's more so that he's making the comment about Spike itself, or Spike himself, and not the fact that that Xander's making these things about him being chiseled and muscled. I think maybe,
I say that, explain
or is
that. I'm
it,
not
or do
sure
you think, or it could be the reverse? Oh, well, no, I guess it
I'm
is the
not saying that
reverse.
that means Xander's gay. I'm saying it shows he's more comfortable in who he is and doesn't have to react and have those like, ooh, somebody might think I'm gay fears. Like he's just throwing it out there like, this is a good
Well,
looking guy.
I'm gonna, I'm gonna, I'm gonna go back because I think that that's well, and again, it's one of those things where it's like that could be potentially problematic, but not really because no one says anything because he is like going on this like trail of like, oh, he's so, which is also unusual for Xander to say something like that, but it also means that he's noticed. And so it's like, what are we saying here in this moment? Like, are we saying like, and it's okay, but that's the thing. I think it would have been okay. I guess it would have been okay for him to say it. It's okay for him to say it. Their reaction is weird because it's Xander saying it. And it's like, oh, you've
Yeah, but I think it's
noticed it
more like,
before?
well, I mean, there's probably that element, but it's also the element of like
And it's
Xander
Spike.
saying it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like
And it,
Xander is saying
yeah,
this, and it's about Spike, and you hate
yes,
Spike.
yeah.
And so what's happening here? What's going
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm
I
not
think
saying
that's a
it's like,
natural reaction to it because like
I'm just saying it's a slight moment of growth for Xander. Um, I'm not saying it's like, woohoo, the show is like really shown how like,
yeah, that's true. Um
it's changed or Xander's changed. And even to the fact of like, again, like considering basically like so many of these like questionable to like obviously bad queer moments, particularly specifically like about gay men, are all done for jokes with Xander. I mean,
mhm,
obviously the whole Larry situation and Larry coming out in the way like he
right.
thinks Xander was coming out to him and the way Xander freaks out about that. But so saying like showing from that to like commenting on Spike and Xander not being afraid of like somebody thinking he was gay.
Mhm.
Uh, what I'm saying is that like for Xander, that's growth. I'm
Yeah, I
not
guess
saying it's
so.
like a great moment, but I'm like, yeah,
Where it's a little bit, yeah.
yeah.
Um and then we have like like the stuff with Andrew too,
Hmm.
where and again, I never got this about Andrew. Again, why it took again, it's the path of the character so they can do whatever they want to. It just feels odd that it took Andrew so long, like for them to rate him to be gay. Like he was clearly like he presented as a gay character from day one. So,
Yeah.
and I get why not necessarily having that moment in season 6. It makes sense. to have all of that, even though he's still like lusting after Spike and like talking about all these things are like this coded stuff is coming up. But why it takes so long to like get into the comics. And I guess we don't have like it's not a show about Andrew, so I guess we don't have time to like delve into that and like have
Well,
that
that would be
emotional
like,
journey.
I think with Andrew, two things. One, yes, there wasn't the time for it. We already had so much going on in season 7. Andrew's not the focus of the show. We're not going to explore his sexuality in that season. If the show had gone on and they didn't explore it, then I think you could, certainly question what the heck are they thinking. But the other part of it is that I just think Andrew was not mature enough. He didn't have a strong sense of who he was, and let alone his sexuality. I mean, that's part of his problem. He was letting everyone influence him because he didn't know who to be, and he couldn't, you know, stand up for himself and stand up
Hmm.
on his own. He just followed what everyone else was doing. He followed what his brother did by, releasing flying monkeys during the school play. And then he followed Warren and Jonathan. And then he followed the first by killing Jonathan. So he needed to grow more, I think, before he would come to those realizations. And essentially that's what happens in the comics.
Yeah, I mean, and again, and on that growth, and I guess, and in some cases, yeah, it's funny. Like there's sort of the visual play where like we as the audience member know something about a character that they don't even know about themselves. And so I guess when we look at it that way, it's like, oh, that's kind of, you know, oh, it's a little like tongue in cheek and it's a little funny because it's like, oh, Andrew, like poor sweet adorably gay Andrew. Because there's all these scenes in the comics where he's like hanging out, now that he's a watcher and all this other stuff, and he like even on Angel when they're like after the immortal and he's like on this he's got the two ladies on his arms and he's like, see you later guys, I'm off to, and I was like, come on Andrew, that's not like.
So what's interesting, and this obviously also gets talked about, written about a lot. And I think it's interesting too, particularly because you do have such a explosion in pop culture of queer and gay culture in the 90s. And a lot of that happens because of the AIDS epidemic and because of the advocacy for resources, for a cure, for treatments, that really forces the gay community to be out in a much more public way than may have been experienced um, in a while. I mean, it was sort of the next step of that, you know, being being a bigger public presence and not and saying we're not going away. So as part of that, you start to then have a lot of metaphors used for other forms of quote unquote coming out. And you have that really with Buffy coming out as the Slayer, in particular to her mother. I mean, that
Yeah,
conversation feels like you could change some of the words and she could have been telling her mother that she was gay.
right. Um, yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point too about all of that, that we're, that post the 80s like the AIDS epidemic, which I mean technically I think we're still kind of in one. But
Yeah.
depending on who you ask and who you talk to. But um the the fact that people weren't dying anymore, I think that's like where it was like where you were like, we're not going away. Yeah, we're not going away because like people aren't actually dying anymore. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
like now you have to deal with it. Now you have to face it. And like now there's like the numbers are growing and it's like, look, this is more and more people. Um, and so yeah, I think that was a part of it. It was like a regrowth. It was a lot of I think a lot of people probably from the 80s and who were writing for like late 90s early 2000s television maybe wanted to kind of celebrate the people that they had lost and really sort of
Mm-hmm.
give voices to that. And so which is probably why we see, and this is my like pseudo psychological like viewpoint on something, but maybe that's why we see a lot more representation of gay men on television than we do lesbians, because we
Mm-hmm.
lost so many more gay men. And I think people like the gay men in media were like, we need to push these voices and remember these people, Even though gay community should never forget like that it was the lesbians who were there who took care of you and allowed you to get there and like fed you and came into the hospitals and did all that stuff when no one else would touch you. So anyway, all of that's another tangent, but I think it's but yeah, I think you're right. Like when like this coming out story of of Buffy coming out to her mom as the Slayer, Willow coming out as a lesbian with Tara, all of those things like they're um Andrew comes out later, Larry comes out. So there like a lot of
Right.
people come out in that show in a lot of different ways. Um which is but I think they're done in such great ways. I think like Larry's is the most sort of like I think kind of like traditional and feels very much like on a very special episode.
Yeah.
But wasn't
Yeah.
at all. Um but has the most feeling of that.
Yeah. And I mean, with Larry's case, I think almost he's a little bit more the bury your gay trope,
Hmm.
even though I know, I'm fairly certain that's not the intention. The intention was like, oh, this is one of the characters from high school that's not the core that you know and love. And so again, we want to hit the pain, so we're going to kill him. But it's like Larry was barely there,
Right.
you know. Um, and then he's at the time the only known gay character on the series, and they kill
Hmm.
him off in the
Yeah.
finale, the season 3 finale. So I certainly can understand it, um making the case with that.
I wonder if that was kind of a lead up too. I wonder if that was one of the things that they were like, we're gonna make Willow gay in season 4. And he
So we
was
have to
like,
get rid of the other gay
so we're
characters.
like, we're gonna like introduce this idea of a gay character to see how he tests and see how people take it.
Oh, I never
And
thought of
then,
that.
but then they're like, but we'll kill him off at the end and see how that works. And then we'll move in with Willow and be like, and when everyone was like, we love gay Larry. Because I love Larry. I think like Larry was great. And I love like I think the use of Larry sort of throughout, especially in season 3, we get him a lot like in
Yeah,
Doppelgangland, we get him in Go Fish and all of that stuff. Just sort of
that's
give it.
season 2 actually.
Oh no, season 2 is Go Fish. Right. He's in Go Fish, Doppelgangland, and then um but he does sort of have like this arc. His character gets an arc.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I think it's like Larry, then Amy, then Jonathan, sort of feel like from the high school
Yeah. Oh,
kiddos.
one thing I do love with Larry's story is when Xander goes back to confront him as being the potential killer and earshot.
Hmm.
And, he makes it seem like, oh, because had been hiding being gay, you might be like wanting to go like suicidal or, go crazy on the school. And he's like, dude, my grandma like hooks me up with guys now. Like he's so super like out and chill and like just totally cool with everything. I love that moment.
Yeah, and it makes it, and again, and it's one of those things that makes it okay.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, and I can talk to my family about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And like
s-
Xander, chill out.
yeah, calm down. Your homophobia is showing, Xander.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
You got a pinch of homophobia right there on your left cheek. Just right there. No, hold on, let me get it for you. Let me get it for you. Did I get it? Did I get it?
All right. Should we discuss Spike?
Ooh, yes. I'm sorry, that was such a visual like without a thought. I was like, should we? Yes. What do we want to say? Hi, Spike.
Well, I just read an interesting take on Spike, and one of the pieces I was reading about queerness in Buffy, that he kind of really breaks some stereotypes, like gender stereotypes, and there's a little bit of like gender fluidity in him. And I mean, part of that I think is the punk element that he comes in. So, him wearing eyeliner and chip nail polish. But the fact that he can be, a badass fighter and tough and yet also emotionally vulnerable. He's not afraid of that. So, there's a lot of and obviously there's the implication that he and Angel slept together at least once, but let's face it, it was probably more when they were as part of the Scourge. But so it's it's more not so much saying that Spike is queer per se, but there's elements in other characters, particularly like him, that's crossing those lines, that's bending gender boundaries and stereotypes.
I think some of those characters are breaking sort of heteronormative
Yes.
like concepts and what it means to be heterosexual, and which I think is important because it like that lends itself to sort of allyship of queerness when you start
Right.
to like break down those conceptions of gender norms and culture, and like what does it mean to be a man, and what am I supposed to, like, as a man I'm supposed to do this, and these are my gender roles and all that stuff. And so when you
Right.
start like when you create characters who can subvert those things, then it makes room for other people, because it's like,
Yeah.
well, let's expand the definitions of all of these things. And like Oz is kind of a similar sort of
Yep.
situation. Like,
Agreed.
Oz is a person who is, you know, is a person who, challenges heteronormative roles. Spike does as well.
Right.
Um, and absolutely, there's at least the one. There was at least the one. Um,
Yes.
I want that episode, but whatever. Um, I want to know what that. I want to know what it was like. Um, it was like angry. It was probably one of those things they got into a fight and then they just like went for it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but so, you know, even some of those just like tender, because you didn't get a lot of like tender moments between men on that show, and
Yes.
and so
Agreed.
that's something, when you're trying to challenge the ideas of what queerness is, or what, you can only, I mean, honestly, you can only do so much. So let's
Yeah,
start there.
of
Like,
course.
we can't expect every show to champion and change everything and be everything to all people all the time.
Right.
It's not gonna work. It's like
Right.
you're asking for,
It becomes watered down
and
if
it's a
you're
shit show of a show. Like, it's a show
right.
that's not good.
Right.
So you can't be like, everyone should be queer, and like, yeah, we need more queer representation. We need more bi, we need more trans, we need more asexual, we need more pan, we need more of all of it,
But it doesn't mean it should all
all
happen in one
in
show.
one show. Yeah.
Right.
We need to spread it out. Um, yeah, because otherwise
True.
it's just too much in one place. Because I don't want to see it all in one place, I don't think. I just feel like that
No,
would feel,
I agree.
I mean, maybe it could exist in one place, but but that just feels like a lot. So
Yeah.
yeah, anyway.
But I mean, also, I would expect these elements of queerness in a show like Buffy the Vampire Slayer if its premise is to break those gender stereotypes with its main character and invert. I was like, what is the word? Invert that stereotypical horror moment of the blonde cheerleader going into the alley and getting killed, and she turns out to be the killer.
Right.
She slays the monster. So, a show based on that premise should be upending and inverting other stereotypes and breaking other barriers. So I think it actually would have been weird if the show didn't bring in elements of queerness.
Yeah, for sure. Although they probably could have easily gotten away with it.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
Yeah, agreed.
I think that's the point is that like it chose to do that. So it gave us as
Yes.
it chose to give us these gay characters along the way. It chose to sort of like to give us those metaphors and those similarities. It gave us a gay slayer at the end. It get
Yeah.
with Kennedy. You know, it when she actually becomes a slayer. So we get to experience some of all of what that would be and what that would look like in one place. So I guess you can have, a lot of it in one place. But again, but you want more, then you just end up wanting more.
Right.
Um,
Well, that's where you need,
and that's why you
spin-offs,
need spin-offs and more
reboots,
and more
all those
more
elements.
platforms for all of those things to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you don't have enough time. There's never enough time. There's never enough time. I mean, even with like everyone says, those scenes between Buffy and Faith are
Right.
very, very queer coded in that
Right.
and their relationship, especially early on. And in Bad Girls, it's very, um, you know, Bad Girls.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What's the one in season 7 then?
Um, Dirty Girls.
Dirty Girls, Bad Girls, and Dirty Girls. Um, According to
Which,
Caleb, they're all horrors, so it
yeah,
doesn't matter.
exactly. Well, it's funny that you say that. I never thought of this before, but Dirty Girls does sound like, so negative. And Bad Girls to me sounds like sexy and rebellious, and
Right.
which is kind of what they were being. Like,
Yeah.
it's interesting
They're
anyway.
bad
But
girls.
yeah, and even though now, you know, Joss Whedon has said like, okay, I can see why people were seeing that subtext of um that lesbian subtext to the
Hmm.
Buffy Faith relationship, even though that was not the intention. It was more meant to be like her other side, the yin yang, her dark shadow side. Um, there was something so because you weren't seeing necessarily those elements unless they were being done in a very like stereotypical way or as a way to like bait for sweeps. It always struck me as like kind of hot and crazy and there's an element of like two girls exploring and it doesn't necessarily have to go anywhere, but it's what you're supposed to do at that time in your life is
Yeah,
figure those things out.
well, I think it's funny too because I've seen clips and I would should find where they like clip together all of these things of
Yeah.
Buffy and Faith, and it's like where he's like, "Well, I don't know how you didn't see it. Like, I don't know, I don't see that," and then they like clip together like all the things that they do that it's like. You wrote this, buddy. Like you filmed this.
I,
How do you not see
okay,
how queer this look like this is so
to me it was actually more obvious than initially the development of Willa and Tara's relationship.
yes.
I was like, come
Come
on.
on, you guys. Really? Do we
How do
not?
you not see it?
Oh, yeah.
Like, even
You
if that
wrote
wasn't,
it.
even if that was just really like for the two of them, almost like a flirtation, and like what it meant to be like those two slayers and two hot chicks with superpowers, and it was
Right.
never going to go anywhere. Like, dude, it was like served
It's
up on a platter.
it is very much like, look,
It is like the subtext is just under the text.
I didn't jump to conclusions. Their conclusion were, and I
Yep.
made a tiny little step, and their conclusions were. Um, that's that's it. That's it. I
Yeah.
didn't jump
I mean,
anywhere.
I have to say it's still one of my favorite elements.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. I love their relationship. I
I do
mean,
too.
um, you know. So I mean, they get, I mean, they, again, like with the stuff with Willow and Tara and all of that stuff, I think they get a lot of it right. Um, they get a lot of, stuff gets done wrong. I mean, to, again, for the point of creating tension and drama and all of that stuff. And so, yes, it happens. Like, queer characters going through trauma for the sake of entertainment, it
Yeah.
happens, but that's what happens on TV. So I think,
Yeah.
again, I think it's one of those things where no one's happy, because if they're a happy gay couple or something, then for the most part, people are like, oh, well, this is boring if they don't go through any of this.
Yeah. So, I mean, overall, definitely a lot of great elements of exploration of queerness and breaking barriers, inverting tropes and stereotypes, but they still had some ways to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, but they gave us some great stuff and I appreciate it. And I think what's so great that really shows the impact it had is all the stories you have of people saying, this helped me come out, this helped me be um, you know, settle into my skin as somebody who came out,
Hmm.
whatever variation of that story of how that show helped, how Willow and Tara's storyline in particular helped anyone who is queer or found, realized that they were queer. I think that's really, one of the most powerful things that any sort of art can do.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Small Bites. Let us know your thoughts about the episode by leaving a review or rating us wherever you listen to your podcast.
You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Buffy Podcast and email us at abuffypodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.
Bye.